Thank you for the warm introduction. Uh, Pretty much most of my career I have been into the digital commerce space. My topic is pretty much aligned with what I have been doing over the years. For the last 11 years with Adobe, pretty much into digital subscription commerce. Um, so one of the problem that we want to kind of talk about as a part of this is, in the digital commerce space, the product onboarding. So the topic is from chaos to clarity, a multi-agent architecture for intelligent digital commerce catalog. What you see is the typical catalog. You go to Amazon, maybe Adobe, you have a list of products that you can purchase or subscribe to. And behind the hood, there is a lot going on. There's a lot of fragmented systems operating in. There are a lot of strategic decision that goes in while you are actually onboarding the products. Let's talk about when a company starts. If it's a startup, you just have a few SKUs or offering, so you don't really have the scale to deal with. But the moment you are talking in terms of large commerce companies, say Amazon or Walmart or Adobe, I think there have thousands and thousands of products. And each time these product configuration, the demographics where they are selling, the geos and so many aspect changes, including the cohort of customers that they are dealing with. So this brings in certain complexity and the onboarding becomes tricky. And when we are talking about the product onboarding, it span across multiple domains. Typically the catalog domain, it could be pricing, like initially the catalog where you're kind of defining the product, then pricing the product. You may have to deal with some of the language aspect, which typically we call it merchandising, like the description and aspect. And when you are launching it in new markets, you also need to kind of ensure that the translation happens correctly. And of course, the validation, the payment instrument, so on and so forth. So it's not easy. Generally, what happens is typically most of these companies that we are talking about, these have existed across decades. And they have a lot of legacy and traditional system, and in fact, many manual processes still, because some of the product-related things are strategic decision. You kind of take a strategic decision whether you price so and so for a certain market. So there is a manual aspect to it, and yet there are certain things which are fragmented but API based, but those are traditional. Those are not well coordinated. So these are the problems with the traditional, like it has, sometimes they deal with brittle integration across various domains. They have global commercial demands, but you may not be able to meet those because when you go to a new market, the aspect changes. The demands of those market can vary. The compliance aspect may vary. So we are thinking those in terms of a new system, like AI-driven ecosystem, which kind of fastens this process, brings in that intelligence, the agentic intelligence into picture, and allows some of the kind of regular tasks which are not really strategic to be delegated to our AI agents. And yet, the architecture that we are going to discuss is backward compatible. It does not take off the entire legacy system, which are generally pretty large, spanning across multiple domains, kind of immediately, but allows for the integration to happen over a course of time. Because generally, for bigger companies, one of the fundamental problems that we deal with is some of the teams are much more ahead of others. Some of the teams are still strategic in nature. They have to have manual workflows, product-related aspects. So because of all this, we lead with this problem: outdated system, compliance risk, fragmented flows, and which eventually leads to market delays when we want to launch a product, but we are not able to launch on time. So This is talking about the product onboarding bottleneck. Typically, we take weeks to launch. Like if you don't have a proper, well-defined architecture in place, the fragmented system, things happening very differently in different systems, there won't be any proper coordination and it causes a lot of problem because it can cause partial activation. Maybe, you can go through the entire workflow, onboard the product, yet certain things missing. The data will not kind of consistent with each other. It could be error prone because of the same reason. Some crucial data like pricing or certain things missing out or translation to key languages for a certain geo. Like if you are launching something in France, you want those languages to be translated in French. But imagine if it is not even done, somehow missed out. And it's possible because you are dealing with thousands and thousands of product, various SKU. SKU is typically the stock keeping unit, which you identify the offerings that you sell. Zero visibility, if it is not well architected, generally what happens is you cannot really go through the checkpoints of the system and identify the core issues. So this again, is a typical problem that you want to address as a part of your well-defined architecture. We'll see how we are solving it in the agentic AI. I talked about it. We cannot scale globally because the demands, most of the companies are global organizations and they need to have a quicker time to market to various geo, whether it's Australia, Asia or Europe, you have to have a faster time to market. And unless this compliance aspect, the language translation aspect, different markets have different pricing variations. You cannot keep the price consistent, whatever you are selling in US, just go pick that same price and sell it in Europe. It's a classic case of failure. So you have to ensure the pricing are being made correctly, takes in the analytic aspects factored in before you do those things. And of course, the compliance is something mandatory. You should be within the framework of law of the land. So these are some of the product onboarding bottleneck, and that is why the catalog intelligence matter. So each of the domains I talked about will have kind of needs to be solved independently, and yet it should make the room for agentic capabilities in future. I will move fast because we have to cover a lot of grounds here. So this is the main crux of it. If you want to take some key thing from this session, I would ask you to focus on this. This is the architecture that we are going to talk about, which actually addresses the problem that we spoke so far. It's the IFPOF, which stands for Intelligent Federated Product Onboarding Framework. It's a way we are architecting a legacy system, which was vanilla orchestration based, which is typically most of the commerce companies solve the problem in a legacy way into a agentic world, where we kind of bring in the intelligence aspect and still ensure we are backward compatible and yet introduce all the goodness of the agentic capability, the various observability, auditability, and other aspects. So it's typically event-driven because we want to maintain a backward compatibility. We continue to follow the standard software principle, which is the contract first design, then human in the loop, which is a very fundamental aspect of agentic workflow. You cannot really let an AI control very critical aspects of your business because you don't know when things can go kind of in a bad shape and you will not be able to recover. So this is how the multi-agent operating model typically operates for product onboarding point of view. Each of the various subdomains that I talked about, product definition, pricing, compliance, the localization for various geos, the merchandising, the description, whatever you see in the commerce page, will be independently evolving into domain agents. And you are not enforcing it right away. You give the independence to team, whichever is fast moving to completely adopt agentic AI versus the one where you don't have a ready-made answer. Because there are certain strategic ones like where how the pricing and all to be determined, those are pretty much kind of part of the business, the leadership inputs, those are factored in. Those cannot totally become agentic and automated. So it kind of evolves in a nice manner that you kind of maintain the backward compatibility. So yeah, these are some of the standard feature of the AI-powered onboarding journey. But I think these are self-explanatory. I will not go into the detail. We have a lot of ground to cover. It should be having an intelligent ingestion. What it means is you can not rely on typical form-based input. It should be you go and talk your requirement, and that is good enough. It could be voice or text based, and then the journey of the question answer round starts with the capability and takes in all the necessary input. Then of course it validates and enriches, and then you continue with the saga-based orchestration workflow, which we will see in a while. And then of course you have a global publication, you kind of deploy across the market and across the geos in a very standard manner. Yeah, this is the reference architecture. I'm coming to the crux of the thing. So in a typical non-agentic workflow, this is how an advanced commerce company would generally solve a problem. They have an orchestration workflow. For this example, I'm taking orchestration. It could be point-to-point or swarm-based as well, but orchestration is most well adopted across the commerce companies. And you have various participating services. These are nothing but the various domains: pricing, payment, merchandising, product definition, so on and so forth. There is a well-defined interface, and they coordinate with request response mechanism, which are adhering to standard software interface and well-defined contract first design. And the lifecycle orchestrator, the yellow box that you see, it goes on and operates those event request and response, and the ordering of those is controlled by the blue box, which is the workflow engine over here. And then, of course, once each of the participating service, for instance, product definition is done with the work, it responds back saying, hey, I'm done with the work. So in order to flag that you are good to go, then the workflow engine delegates it to the next participating system. This is a typical, there is nothing agentic here. It's a typical workflow. Now, when we move to the next one, the agentic AI-driven workflow engine, you have exactly the same, but the control shifts to the intelligence, the LLM integration, which, kind of hallmark of an agent, like it perceives some request coming in from a product manager or a business user who wants to define some product. It takes it to the next level of pricing, and it kind of follows it through the same step. The various boxes you see from the previous slide are replaced with agents, but it's a hybrid system. Participating service A could continue to be a regular legacy service, yet the B can be agentic because the interfacing is still event-based. One typical is the Kafka-based event, just to give you one example. Moving further, it operates in well-defined boundaries. So pricing agent will be only confined, owns the data of pricing. It has absolutely no ownership of the data of any other. This is a typical software paradigm. The same goes for rest of the agents. Each of the agent fundamentally operates pretty much on their own domain, but they are well kind of coordinated with the federated mechanism that you see over here, the lifecycle orchestrator and the workflow engine. There are typical exception handling flow. If there are exceptions, it's flagged and a human goes on and checks it. This slide is exactly the same. It gives you much more in terms of example, how things are happening. When we talk about a multi-agent system, there are few standard architectural pattern. It could be, supervisor versus worker. So orchestrator typically works in that format. Then there is a swarm-based architecture where there are a lot of worker agents, and each of those agents have a context, what exactly to pick up and do the work. So any of the worker can just pick up product definition based upon the availability, and it can do its stuff. Yeah, from here I will let my friend Vipin to continue. He will take you through the rest of the slides, how those agentic workflows and standard principles are followed in the architecture.
Okay, thanks everyone, and thanks Amit. So let me start with basically, Amit talk about the high-level architecture, the orchestration, and this figure basically the intelligent product onboarding dashboard. This is just a representation of how the product onboarding dashboard look like. It provide like first of all, it depends upon a lot of time. Most of the time, it will depend upon the business, the context, and the complexity of the uh, you know in terms of the company which need to be onboarded. And this is not a representation of either Amit company and my company. Uh, just a quote. Yeah. So it gives you a high level 360-degree visibility, and at the same time it has basically some of the key metrics including, let's say, onboarding completion, phase by phase status alerts and integration delays, some data quality issues, and high level performance indicator like time to value and the customer satisfaction. And coming into the agentic workflow in action, one part what we mentioned about is the autonomous agent. So this in the previous slide we have seen the autonomous agent. They continuously monitor the diverse event streams. And when we say streams, it just, let's say, think about an event, maybe publish on a Kafka message. It ingests that event, it store it, for historical purpose, it process it, right? And finally, it bring timely, trusted, and actionable business insight, which can be used, consumed by the downstream application. At the same time, every action, because when LLM in a self-autonomous or autonomous way, they do some action. These all action need to be auditable, and they also would be captured. And every action taken care by this agentic workflow is basically recorded, and it's more like a breadcrumb which being joined together to bring a complete data lineage or for auditable purpose. And these are the three major core principle in terms of the orchestration, which is all about your trust, governance, and auditability. So every agent action, right, must be explainable, like bringing explainability into the complete orchestration part. And every platform, record what's being changed, why it changed, and who approved it. That's, again, auditability point of view. And then there is a human approval, which is required for your sensitive data change. Let's say you want to change the price, some compliance, some kind of regional policy update. So there is going to be always a human in loop, irrespective of whether you do like a self-autonomous or, I don't call it fully autonomous, but more in a self-autonomous way. Because the fundamental principle of LLM, we know these are all probabilistic model, right? You give certain input, they're going to give always certain output. And some of the foundation around this federated architecture, right? One is basically the domain autonomy. What it means is every domain, right? Either pricing, compliance, inventory, they are fully, kind of autonomous in this isolated environment, like at that individual block. And each service owns its own data and owns its logic independently. So take an example of a pricing, it is working in its own environment. And then each is governed by the design, which is all about basically decentralizing execution from centralized policy enforcement. And the other part is very critical is the contract first integration. And this is all about, as Amit mentioned, when you build this complete orchestration, you're not going to say, oh, I'm going to solve the complete orchestration of this onboarding, in a day one, and you have everything fully, semi-autonomous. You start with something which, like say, pricing. But compliance, you cannot make it because it's going to take time, regulatory approval to, do those or semi-autonomous way on the compliance side. And what it means is one agent either talk to certain service or certain agent. It need to be more like a contractual base between all this, right? A schema driven. And then you have a capability graph, which is nothing but all about the discovering the agent services. And last part is, is all about traceability. As we mentioned, to trace all the actions what it performs, so that we can bring the complete auditability across the complete data flow. And now comes when we're trying to, kind of integrate with the existing commerce system, right? So one thing, this multi-agent, right? They're not going to completely replace the core commerce system, right? They are just some part you're going to replace, let's say, in a fast way, and the some part, it will take time. Take an example of, again, going back to the take of example of compliance, which is going to take time because it might need a lot of government approval, especially related to GDPR compliance in different countries. And this and second part is coordinate across your catalog, pricing, billing, payments. And this is more focusing on the, you know, how human and AI, they are collaborating. So AI in self-autonomous, semi-autonomous way, it is going to basically, ingest those actions or, the Kafka signals basically, and it is going to bring timely, it process it and just store it, and it finally brings some business actionable insights. And finally, human is the one who is going to review it, approve it, so that, human has a control over certain actions. And outcome is in terms of measurable, right? You can get close to 10 times faster launches, reduce, about 90% manual effort, and definitely it's going to give you a 360 global visibility. And this is something me and Amit are working on, something around the self-healing catalog, and we are publishing one paper on this, which is all about how this agent is finally going to, do a self-healing. If let's say there is a there is a mistake in your pricing, how they can self-heal and correct it. Yeah, and these are just like a, instead of waiting for manual cleanup, agent is, basically recommend or apply some safe corrections and full auditability. Yeah, that's all for today. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Are there any questions from the audience about any of these architectures that or patterns? And I see that I'm in the way of pictures being taken. I apologize. But are there any questions from the audience at the moment? All right, let me bring the microphone to you. One moment, please. Well, but we'd like to have it for the recording, and just in case by the door, it's kind of hard to hear. So here you go.
Is there some way to just double click a little deeper as far as the framework that you're talking about? I guess I follow the slides and presentation, but like from a practical standpoint, a little more around like the stack and the approach that you're using would be helpful to appreciate. So I don't know if you've got a moment to kind of talk a little more about like, hey, we've built with this is where we've seen success, because this is very generalized at this point. I'd love to hear what you have particularly used and seen success with.
It's going to be tricky to talk in front of you.
So the challenges would be, the most fundamental is it spans across the domain, right? Because, you have, when we are talking about the various teams that are dealing with, it's, I can say, to the tune of 200, 300 for a large organization. Now, coordinating the roadmaps of each of those teams are different. So, this agentic AI is nice, shiny thing. The problem is one system maybe leaps ahead than the other, and they may be able to, kind of move faster, but the other teams would be slowing down. But eventually, the end of the entire product onboarding is kind of, the sum total of all the teams. The whole problem solves only when you are able to reduce the time, which typically is months and weeks, down to a few days or maybe a few hours. But the moment is, if you're long pull, the teams are not able to automate and all, then it becomes a tricky thing. And yet, there are some teams which genuinely cannot really go into the full automation mode with agentic AI because of the limitation. Those are strategic aspects. So I believe, those are the typical in the software design and development that are the typical pain points. Yeah, you can see through all these various. Here it's just demonstrative. The real use case is even more. There are payment instrument surveys and so on and so forth.
The question is, what does success look like? And that's it's the short question. So, did you want to read?
It sounds like not every group in this vision that you're describing is achieved. Like this is not an end-to-end, everything's fully automated and orchestrated. What, of one successful group, what does that look like? What have they done to achieve some level of agentic success, even if it's limited to just one of those facets?
I mean, the success is all depend upon, in terms of your faster launch, could be reducing manual effort and the global visibility. Thank you.
All right. You're the next speaker, so if you'd like to ask, if you'd like to ask.
I think the question that you were asking was, if you go back to that slide that you were showing, I think the question was something along the lines of, if you double click on, let's say the validation, let's say that the validation agent is actually deployed and is successful. If you double click on the validation agent, what does the architecture of that look like? Like, how did the team actually build out the validation agent? What are the systems that they've put in place?
Yeah, let me take that up. So, what happens is in the validation workflow, it's about the data validation. So, what happens is you have this offering, product definition, language, pricing. So, it may so happen that the validation, because of there are multiple steps happening, you may miss out some critical data. For example, you may have used the US price for a UK price. You may have missed out the latest tax compliance rules. Say, for example, let's say when you are talking about France or GB, they have VAT and sales tax, which could be different and dynamically changing. Every new month, it could change. In US, it's based upon zip code. So those aspects are validated. You ensure those are factored in while you are actually doing the pricing. You can even miss out the merchandising data in some cases, and which may fall back to the default. Default local is EN, which is English, and then you have France, FR underscore FR, different kind of locales, which kind of for specific geos. So the validation agent typically would span across the various domain and ensure there is a sanctity in the data. The data conforms to whatever we are trying to onboard.